Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we've been talking about the fall of the global currency system, the currency reset for a long time now, and it's kind of inevitable, especially in the digital age that we live in. I feel like it's almost 100% that we're going to be dealing with less currencies in the future, possibly very heavily built around cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. But there's interesting news that came out of this Davos 2020 nonsense talk fest. And I wanted to go into this CNBC.com article that says the world could have just 5 or 6 currencies by 2040. Brazil's economy minister says. And as the article goes into, from Davos, Switzerland, there are more than 100 recognized currencies in the world, but that could fall to 5 or 6 in the next 20 years. The Brazilian economy minister said at the World Economic Forum, WEF, Thursday. European countries introduced 20 years ago a common currency, allowing, for example, people from France to travel to Germany without the need to change their cash. This could be replicated in other parts of the world in the future, provided they align themselves politically or economically, Paulo Guedes, economy minister of Brazil, said at a panel. And I quote, "If you consider the political dimension and the economic dimension, we would have 5, 6 currencies 20 years, 30 years from now," he said. At the moment, the US dollar is seen as a safe currency asset, meaning that its value grows at times of crisis. Various countries have chosen to peg their currencies to the US dollar for stability and trade reasons. However, in times of instability for the US dollar, the peg could hurt those countries. Developing common currencies across different countries could help these economies, reducing their dependence on the US dollar. And I quote, "There would be one continental currency, the euro, another continental currency, the dollar dominance area, and China would have their currency. There are 200 million overseas Chinese. These people live in the Philippines, they live in Malaysia, and they trade with China. They go back and forth all the time, and they are trading renminbis, and they will not keep liquidating their grants and debts using dollars," Guedes said, supporting his idea of a fewer yet stronger currencies around the world. It continues here. However, speaking at the same panel, the IMF's chief economist, Gita Gopinath, said this was a scenario of pretty low probability. And I quote, "Given what we know now, and unless there are major wars that take place or serious walls that get built everywhere, assuming that doesn't happen, I think it is a pretty low probability scenario that would happen," Gopinath said. She added that in order for other currencies to seriously challenge the dominance of the US dollar, they need strong institutions. There cannot be a tiny possibility that would not be a zone the way it is now in the future, she said. This is often the criticism against the euro, currently used in 19 countries. The eurozone has yet to develop certain mechanisms that will reassure investors and ordinary citizens that when the next economic shock hits, its structure will not collapse. And I quote, "I can see people very easily switching from paying in cash to paying using digital payment platform, but whether they will as easily switch from the dollar to the renminbi, that is a completely different question," Gopinath said at the WEF panel. So we're going to go into this right away, but I do want to note something else that caught my eye, is that also at the same conference, obviously World Economic Forum, they debuted a framework for central bank digital currency, and there's a lot of talk about central banks pushing digital currencies. But first, I want to note what that woman said there, which was that there was low probability due to there would have to be wars and walls put up everywhere. Now, obviously, the world is in a kind of a chaotic period right now, as we can clearly see, and there is a huge potential for war in the next 20 years. You kidding? I mean, it's been nonstop war for the last 20 years. Who's to say that's going to end anytime soon? And obviously, in a time when there's bubbles across the board, the everything bubble, there's massive amounts of debt. We're being shaken basically upside down for all of our pocket change at this point. The notion that people are going to stay faithful in the dollar for 20 years, while possible, is unlikely in my opinion. And obviously, going back to the old Bilderberg meetings back in the 1970s, which we've seen leaked documents of over the past years, they talked openly about creating the European Union at the Bilderberg Group, which we confronted two Bilderberg members, including the steering committee member Conrad Black on years ago, who said it didn't happen, but then the leaked documents came out. They've been talking about that for a long time, and they even said at that time that it was a low probability that they would get it to pass. So here we are all these years later in a very much more global world, if you will. Tim, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this talk out of Davos and the notion of 5-6 currencies in the world and what kind of currencies those would be.
Thanks, Josh. Well, I mean, first off, if you really take a look at what's going on today, I mean, there basically is 5 or 6 currencies already that are in existence. I mean, with the dollar being the lion's share of them. And so, I mean, ultimately what the game plan is, I mean, the guys like Gio Griffin wrote about this in the awesome work, Creature from Jekyll Island, where the game plan is to have something like the International Monetary Fund, which doesn't actually operate like a fund. It actually operates more like a bank. And the World Bank actually operates more like a fund. But that's a whole separate issue. But the game plan is to have one of those institutions then create what they're calling the special drawing right, which is a currency that is made up of other currencies. This is already going on right now. This is how the banks transact amongst the big central banks transact amongst each other right now. It's in the SDR. So right now, and this is just going off the top of my head, it's about 50% dollar, maybe about 20% euro, maybe about 5 or 6% renminbi. You've got some of the yen in there, and then maybe a few other tiny currencies sprinkled in there. And so you might transact, like the author was saying, in your own local currency, but then that's going to be then tied to another digital currency, and I think Libra was basically trying to jump the gun on this, where, they had saw how lucrative this would be and the amount of power that you can wield if you're the one that's in control of this. And I think the big central banks and the governments around the world were like, well, hell no, not that I'm defending Facebook, because that, a terrible company that's censoring people left and right, especially myself and yourself, and probably a lot of people listening to us, and a lot of the people listening to us like watching are getting censored on there, but they are not as powerful as the central banks. And I think they got too big for their britches. And so regulatorily, the odds of Facebook being able to pull this off or allowed to pull it off is slim to none. And so I do see that is the game plan, and then to marry it with something like, social credit score like they have in China. So, hey, you didn't bow down to, the president, Xi, and then all of a sudden, we're going to, make sure your kids can't go to private school. Now, another thing I saw from what you had mentioned in there is that they talk about recognized currencies. And so, probably the good ones will be the ones that aren't recognized. And so, of course, you see like Bitcoin over my shoulder, things like Monero, and who knows, even by then, this is all, information that's subject to change, but, Bitcoin could get taken over, or there could be different forks of it. Or
Bitcoin Cash is really focusing on privacy lately, which a lot of people feel is moving in a much faster direction than Bitcoin Core. So even that's a possibility.
Yeah, and we'll probably have to do a video soon on, because I did hear some grumblings about like a 12.5% sort of minor tax that they were trying to put on, but that's a whole nother subject. But anyways, these are unrecognized currencies, and there could be countries, but think about it right now. If you're Russia and China, why the hell are you going to go use the US dollar to go buy your oil, or any other country? Almost every country in the world, that's what they do, is they have to use dollars to transact their own goods. But why would you do that? And the other thing is now, maybe Donald Trump didn't get the memo on this, but he's trying to withhold or try to potentially kick, I think it was Iraq out of the SWIFT system and out of the New York Fed system, and which, one of the reasons we went in there was to put him on the system. So maybe he didn't get the memo on that, there's only a few central banks around the world that aren't tied into this big global system. And those are banks like, Libya, Syria, like at the time, Iran. At the time, Iraq, not Iran. They're part of it now. Iran's not part of it. But, this is, it's like we have excuse my language, but it's like basically we have the other country by the balls if we control them monetarily. That's why, like Lord Nathan Rothschild said way back in the day, he said, I care not who makes the money, or I care not who makes the laws. I only care who makes the money, or control the money, and I control the money. I mean, something like that. I mean, I'm sure I messed it up a little bit, but I mean, just that's why you see like behind me, it says King's Ransom. It's to show that our money right now is owned by other people. It's the King's money. It's the Crown's money. It's not ours.
Well, let's get this straight for those watching. I mean, I always try to explain it as best as I can in the most simplistic terms, which is that the currency is printed out of thin air. here through the banking system, fractional reserve lending, all that kind of crap. There's zero reserve in some places. The point is we are under what they call a legal tender system by fiat, by law. And it's under the social contract of usury where we pay off the interest on the debt. Not only are we facing this massive amount of inflation, which causes basically all of the political crises that we see today, on top of that, we are paying like 50% or more of our taxes towards paying off the interest on the debt. I mean, a large portion of it anyway, depending on where you are in the world. It depends from country to country. But the point is, does that sound like anyone that wants to pay off the debt when you're paying off only the interest on the debt? What would happen if you're only paying off the interest on your credit card? Well, I mean, that's just going to keep building up, won't it? The point is that we are in a system that's completely fraudulent. It's passed over to the people. Not only do people face inflation because of it, but on top of that, people face this debt, this crippling debt, and it's getting to the point of being such a huge behemoth that I don't see that domino effect or those dominoes standing much longer. And many of the, like across the board, banks are bankrupt. I mean, the 2008 recession never ended. It was just papered over, and we're getting to the point where it just doesn't seem practical at all to not be backing ourselves up in other currencies. And I don't mean other fiats. I mean, this is just my opinion, of course, but I mean, look at history. Gold, silvers, wealth insurance, cryptocurrencies that are sound and like fundamentally useful and decentralized, especially at this point. The privacy coins, which I think is really important going forward. And there's stuff like even Komodo and a lot of stuff to look into in the cryptocurrency world. So we'll go into that more at another time. But I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like we are at the edge of a cliff here. And I don't know how much longer it could possibly be put off. Tim, what do you think? I mean, is it more likely to see the dollar prolong over the next 10 years or more likely to see it fall over the next 10 years?
You know, it's an interesting question because, you know, if you would have asked me 10 years ago or Jeff Berwick 10 years ago, you know, or most everybody listening to this right now, none of us would have thought that we would have went from 2010 to 2020 without having some sort of a calamity already occur. So, you know, and you'd also brought up the, you know, paying the minimum interest rate. Well, what if, or minimum payment, well, what if the rates turn negative? And then all of a sudden now all of a sudden, you know, it's a deflationary system where we're paying, you know, we're getting money back for being $26 billion in debt. So it's this whole weird scenario that, you know, almost no one could have even dreamed up even like 3 or 4 years ago, how crazy this would get. And then you'd also brought up how, you know, central banks and fiat is just money printed out of thin air. And then you've got people like, you know, the Bank of Japan who literally just take, you know, keyboards, print up money, and then use that money to buy up their own stock market, which they've been doing for years. I'm not going to get into that now, John.
And build ghost cities. You can't forget the ghost cities.
Yeah, then we got the ghost cities, and then, you know, part of me thinks, okay, well, at least they bought something real with their phony money, whereas in America they just piss it away on bombs and a bunch of stupid crap. I mean, I've heard some other, you know, kind of conspiracy theories of why China's built certain ghost cities, and maybe rising tides will then have you know, these other cities inland that they can just move to. I know Sam Tripoli was talking about that on Tinfoil Hat. But who knows? But anyways, getting back to what you're asking me is, you know, it's always, you know, dangerous having, you know, one of the other quotes you had mentioned is, you know, the author said something along the lines of, we need strong institutions. And I'd say, how about we have no institutions? It's the fact that, you know, you take a look at what Bitcoin's long run inflation rate's going to eventually be, is right now, you know, they're, every time you win a Bitcoin, you're getting about 12 and a half, every time you win a block reward, you're getting about 12 and a half Bitcoin. In May, that's going to go down to 6.25. Josh and I just did a video on this a couple days ago that you guys can check out. But, you know, eventually it's going to be going down to one Satoshi, which is, I don't know, what is that, like 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin? You know, 0.80 0.00000. I lost track of my zeros. 8. Yeah. And so you go all the way through it. But if you take a look at what the inflation rate is, eventually it gets down to right around 2%, which, right. And so here you have a software program that it built on consensus where it is doing what, you know, all these guys and girls at the Federal Reserve can't figure out how to do, which is to get inflation at 2%. But 2% is still stealing 2% of your purchasing power every year. And as my job as a financial advisor, if I have very sophisticated modeling software that I spend tons of money on every month utilizing, and let's say, you know, every standard assumption, you know, basically models in, you know, like 2.5% inflation, something right around there. I'll tell you right now, if you try modeling like 5, which is still very, you know, very modest, I would say for 99% of Americans, your plan is going to go bankrupt like immediately. I mean, and it's just, crazy to see what a difference between 2.5 and 5 is. But I would suspect, and you would suspect, and almost everyone listening to suspects that it probably already is 5 or 6 or 7 right now, but they tell us it's 2. And so this gets on to a whole nother subject. But eventually what they're doing is they're destroying everyone's purchasing power. We see articles today, like I forgot what it was, on Drudge, something like 70% of Americans couldn't come up with $1,000 if they had to without going further into debt. And so when you have a whole population that is basically at the behest of the government, it creates a very dangerous situation because people are always going to vote themselves more benefits. And you've got, philosophers like Alexis de Tocqueville back in the day that said something along the lines of, paraphrasing this, obviously, if the public ever finds out that they can vote themselves from the public trough, then that's when democracy dies. And believe me, with guys like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and all these, and Andrew Yang, running right now, it's a very bad situation. And then flip it around to the so-called conservatives. Yeah. And you've got Donald Trump, or what was it, 2 days ago? He said, who the hell cares about the budget? And he said, then it was like something along the lines of, who cares about the budget because we have a country now. Well, if you have a country, but what about you destroy your currency and then everyone in there is broke except for the top class? And I'm not complaining I'm complaining that, woe is me. I plan on being very well throughout this and my clients, but I just know that most people are completely beholden to the government because they need Social Security, whatever pensions coming in. Mm-hmm. It's a very dangerous situation to be in right now. And that's why I like the cryptocurrencies, because I know that what the game plan is. The game plan is to print a whole bunch of money, and we're already on track right now to print $1 trillion just this year.
And there's a ton of the repo madness on top of everything. There's just so many things happening at the same time, and he mentioned that who cares about the budget by Trump, and it's funny because a lot of people on the right were calling out Justin Trudeau in Canada years ago for saying the budget will balance itself. Okay, look, we're gonna sign out right away, as these videos often go too long, and people have been asking for shorter videos lately. But I do want to note for everyone watching that you can become a client of Tim by checking the links below, our bit.ly link in the description, as well as in the comments pinned to the top of the screen. And of course, I want to ask a favor of everyone in a moment, but first, before I get to that, please stick around for that. Before I get to that, Tim, can you give us your bottom line on this story going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that, I think that there probably right that there probably will be 5 or 6. I mean, it might be, that might be the optimistic scenario because, eventually, like the creator of the whole Federal Reserve System, Paul Warburg, who was modeled after, Daddy Warbucks and Annie, he said we shall have one world currency. It's only a matter of through consent or conquest. And for me, it's like we might have 5 different currencies that are then tied into one, or you might just have one. Right. But either way, I don't care about their, what was the term that they used? Their recognized currencies. Most of people listening don't care about the recognized ones, 10, 15 years down the road, because it's going to be the unrecognized ones that are going to be able to save everybody. And then is gold going to be able to count as a recognized currency? Who knows? So long run is, these control freaks want to, consolidate more and more and more, because what they really don't care about isn't really necessarily the money. It's the power. I mean, go watch A Bug's Life. That's what the deal is all about. And, and luckily, decentralization, in my opinion, is the answer. Having these, private cryptocurrencies is the answer. And for anyone that, is concerned about all this crazy stuff going on, if you're close to retirement, this is basically what I've worked for my entire life, is thinking of how to help protect people from these strategies. And so people that got in with me late 2018 basically saw their accounts barely even go down whenever fully invested when everything was crashing. And then last year, most of my clients made 25%. And so, and we had the hedge where they could only lose a tiny bit on the downside. And then we also, offer people ways to get into Bitcoin and ways to get into gold, potentially through their retirement accounts if they wanted to. Because the other thing is, people get scammed buying gold all the time. People try doing these rare numismatics or all this other crap, or they end up, getting, absolutely hammered, or they end up getting scammed buying Bitcoin, because instead of just going out and buying Bitcoin, they're trying to do some other, new thing that's out there that only costs 0.00001 dollars, and and get roped into some Ponzi scheme. So you got to be careful out there. If you don't know it, do your own research. That's a little pitch for me. I appreciate you having me on. And if you guys do want longer videos, John and I just shot one the other day that's like an hour and a half, so you can check out that on my channel right now, and probably on Wham in a day or two. All right,
so I appreciate it. Make sure to check the link below for Tim if you want to become a client. And also, I mean, it really, in my opinion, just comes down to self-responsibility. And competing currency systems are really important. Competing valuation systems based on the demand of the individual rather than putting a gun to people's head and saying, pay off this interest on this debt, all this kind of craziness. We need to put an end to this slavery that people have been so easily succumbed to. So I wanted to give everyone, 4 things that they can do. I think 3 of them are rather easy. But 4 of those things, number 1 is joining float.app, flote.app. It takes 2 seconds. If everyone watching just joined float.app, it would be super, super helpful to us in independent media as we're being shadow banned. And Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, comes in and says herself and brags about how she cut down viewership on so-called controversial content by 70% since last January. More like 85% for us, with monetization going down about 97%. So join float.app, flote.app. Takes 2 seconds. It seriously takes 2 seconds to do, guys. So check that link below. Press like on the video as a second. Number 3 is going and sharing this video on social media. It takes 2 seconds to do that as well. We don't get clicks from YouTube anymore. It used to be that 72% of the views that we got on YouTube were from being suggested in the side. Today, only 1.2% of our views come from that because they stopped suggesting us on anything other than sometimes on makeup reviews. They are targeting only videos that have nothing to do with Wham for suggestions, so they could say that they suggest our videos, but only on videos that no one's ever gonna click on, especially an economics video. So just share on social media.
I almost never even get notifications that I'm part of Wham and have a login, and I never even get notified.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point of it's insulting, and it's truly infuriating. I'm going to be taking some action soon on that, so stay tuned for that. But that's number 3, share on social media. It helps us get seen outside of that and get your friends to, subscribe and all that kind of stuff. We need subscriptions because YouTube's deleting about 1,000 subscriptions a month from our channel, and we're able to keep it just level at about 136,000, which we've been stuck at for about half a year now as far as subscribers go, where we used to get 12,000 subscribers a month. So anyway, number 4 is pretty easy as well. I want you guys to write in the comments, stop stealing my money. Stop stealing my money. Write that in the comments below. We'll know that you watched to the end, and also it helps with the algorithm in general. So again, I really appreciate everyone joining us. We got to get around this shadow banning. We got to work together. We got to join these other alternatives, BitChute, Minds as well. I mean, even the mainstreams, just backing up on as many as possible. Instagram, Twitter. But again, number 1 for me is float.app, flote.app. Again, monetizing videos on there, super chats and crypto, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a really big, movement towards being able to spread free information online. But at the end of the day, while we're transitioning to the next level here at Wham and getting away from YouTube eventually, it comes down to you watching to save free information online or forever hold your peace, because it will be gone. And all you will have left is Fox News, CNN, BBC, and all these creepy criminal propaganda machines that cover up for pedophilia. So anyway, I really appreciate you joining us today, Tim, and we'll be getting back to you guys with much more. Of course, Tim has a podcast with John that is going up, and we hope people check that out. So that's the Liberty Advisor and the Economic Truth. We've got lots more coming at you, so make sure to press like. And until next time, thanks for joining us, Tim. And this is Josh Sigurdson and Tim Picciott signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at Wham? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely, extremely appreciated as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes, $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we could defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a Patreon. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale, so make sure to find us on float.app. That's flote.app. At Josh Sigurdson, as well as at WAM, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on Picciott at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are 2 major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WAM, that's W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.